The Cask of Amontillado. The Cask of Amontillado, published in 1846, is one of Poe's last published stories, released shortly after he had found fame as a poet with the publication of The Raven. It's a revenge story in which Montresor seeks to kill Fortunato as a way of preserving his personal sense of pride in himself and in his family. It's a story filled with images of death, as the second half is set entirely in a family crypt. It's a story that suggests that social insults, similar to the types of insults that Poe must have endured himself, can push a person towards madness. This lecture was recorded in class and presented here for our online class. I'll read you the beginning of Cask of Amontillado. And you tell me why Montresor, our narrator, is telling the story now because he's confessing to a crime. He's killed somebody. Why is he telling the story now? And to whom is he confessing this crime? The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as best I could. But when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length, I would be avenged. This was a point definitively settled, but the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. A wrong is unredressed when retribution overtakes its redresser. It is equally unredressed when the avenger fails to make himself felt as such to him who has done the wrong. It must be understood that neither by word nor deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my goodwill. I continued, as was my wont, to smile at his face, and he did not perceive that my smile now was at the thought of his immolation, death. Why is Montresor telling this story now, and to whom is he telling it?
I think he's telling it to just like the general, like either like whatever their circle of peers or friends or colleagues are, because he's so angry about whatever, how do you say his name?
Fortunato, Montresor? Fortunato?
Yeah.
Let's back into this a little bit. How much time has lapsed between Fortunato's death and the telling of the story? How much time has passed between when Fortunato dies and when Montresor finally tells the story? Does anyone know? It's only mentioned once. Yes?
Like 30 years.
More.
40, right?
50. There we go. We have a winner. 50 wins in the back. 50 years. So 50 years has passed. He tells us that later in the story, between Fortunato's death and the time the story takes place. How old, roughly, do you think Montresor was when he killed Fortunato? 25. Okay, that seems fine. He's old enough to have inherited this house. So his parents are gone, and he has a number of servants, maybe a dozen, we don't know, a number of servants. So he's old enough to have that station. 25 sounds fine. That's a good guess. So how old is he now when he tells the story?
On the verge of dying.
On the verge of dying, right, on the verge of dying. Okay. So he tells us a little bit about who he's telling the story to. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, whose job would it be in town to know the nature of people's souls? Priest, okay. So he's 75. I like your idea on the verge of dying. Seems like a winner. And he's telling this to a priest. So what's the occasion for him telling the story?
Confession before he goes to heaven or something.
It's a confession before he goes wherever he's going to go. To whatever afterlife he's going to, yes. So this is a deathbed confession. Usually, in the tradition of the Catholic Church, I think, that if you are contrite and feel true remorse over the things you've done, you are forgiven. Is this the tone of someone that feels true remorse? Not at all, right? So why is he telling the story?
Like set the record straight.
Set the record straight, right? He hasn't mentioned this for 50 years because why?
He killed somebody.
Because he killed somebody, and he doesn't mention that because...
Won't lose all he has.
Right, doesn't want to go to jail, all those types of things. Now when he's about to die, he's setting the record straight, like you said. He wants people to know that it was him, the small and lowly Fortunato, who took down the very large Montresor. He wants people to know that it was that he was the person to do this. So he's doing this in his last possible moments when he's beyond the age where he could be punished because he's going to be dead soon. The setup of the story says that for a long time, Fortunato had insulted Montresor, our narrator. They are both very wealthy people. Montresor has his own estate. Montresor has a number of servants. Montresor doesn't work, so he is a person of leisure. Fortunato is also a person of leisure, and so we're talking about the difference between, like, I don't know, Montresor occupies the upper 2%, and Fortunato occupies the upper 1%. Fortunato belongs to the certain club in town, and I don't know, maybe that club is the Billionaires Club, and Fortunato will say things like, hey, wasn't that a great time we had when we all got together? Oh, I forgot. You haven't made the $1 billion yet. Sorry, Montresor, didn't mean to insult you again. So Fortunato has been rubbing it in for a long time that in terms of class and wealth standing in the town, that he occupies a slightly higher perch than does Montresor. Montresor's finally reached the point before the scenes in the story open, when he's 25, that he's had enough, he can't take it anymore, and he's going to create a trap whereby he's able to kill and punish Fortunato, and he wants Fortunato to know who did him in. And also a plan whereby he's not going to be caught. The elements of the plan is that he's going to invite Fortunato over to his house, where he's going to chain him to the walls in his basement. So, like Architecture by Poe, we've talked about this before, almost all Poe houses have a basement area that function as two things, a crypt plus one practical purpose. In this case, it's not a crypt and armory, it's a crypt plus wine cellar. He's going to invite him over to his house where he's going to chain him against the wall, and while Fortunato is incapacitated, he's going to brick up that wall so that Fortunato can't get out. And he will die 2-3 days later, probably by dehydration, would be my guess. Okay. What does Montresor do so that he is not caught? How does he arrange the situation so that he's able to get away with it? How does he get away with this? How is he not caught?
You mean like how does he lure him there? Or
How does he lure him there? How does he lure him there?
he tells him he's found some special wine.
Perfect. So do you have any idea what's going on in town while this wine discussion? Yes. What's going on in town?
There's like a fair going on, so the servants are there.
Yeah, so there's a fair going on in town, so we're getting a lot of good ideas on. It's they refer to it as carnival. This would be the European or South American term for what's happening. We'd refer to it in the States as Mardi Gras. Mardi Gras is the season before Lent, in which you have a large party for days, because you're going to give up things that you enjoy in the season of Lent leading up to Easter. There in Mardi Gras, all of the good wine, all the good booze has been sold a while ago. Montresor says, I have a cask, a pipe of this very expensive wine, Amontillado. Fortunato is one of our wine snobs. He thinks that no one's palate is better than his, and so he wants to go over and see if this is the real thing. That's one of the things that gets him over there. Someone mentioned the servants. He has, I don't know, we don't have a number, servants, plural. Seems like a fairly large place. Let's say there's a dozen. How does he get all the servants to leave so that no one's home when he lures Fortunato over to be killed in his basement?
He tells them all not to leave.
Yes, right. He tells them all not to leave. He has a very low opinion of human nature. He thinks that if he says, okay, there's a carnival in town, you guys all have the night off, you can go up to Mardi Gras, get some beads, get some funny hats, have some drinks, you all have the night off. He's afraid that if he tells his 12 servants that they all have the night off, that only like 11 of them will go, and there'll be one like, I'm not feeling so well, I'll stay home. But if he says, none of you have the night off, but I'm going to be away for a few days, and won't be able to check up on you. But I'm expecting all of you not to go to Carnival in town, but instead to stay here and work, even though there's no supervision. If he says that, he's pretty sure that all 12 are going to go down to Mardi Gras because he believes that illicit fun is probably more alluring than sanctioned fun. So if he says, you can't do it, but you aren't going to get caught if you do it, he thinks that all of his servants are going to go as well. This also kind of sets him up for a nice alibi as well. So if for some reason he's suspected of killing Fortunato, maybe he was one of the suspects, and the police come over to his house. None of the servants were there that night. The police come over to his house and ask the servants, did you guys, where were you on the night that Fortunato went missing? What are the servants going to say? We were all here as we were supposed to be and instructed to do. Did you guys hear anything? Nope, we were here the whole time, heard nothing. So he's also starting to set up his alibi. Has anyone ever been to New Orleans for Mardi Gras? Nobody's been to New Orleans for Mardi Gras. Okay. Mardi Gras goes on for days. I used to live on the Panhandle, Florida, went a number of times. It is drinking from dusk till dawn, and then it just starts over again. How does having a township of people who are intoxicated, how is that helpful in terms of Montresor getting away with this?
Because it could be anyone.
Could be anyone. Anyone could have done this, right? Or maybe Fortunato did this to himself. Maybe Fortunato was drunk and fell into the river and his body was carried away. In New Orleans, most of the people there for Mardi Gras aren't locals. They've come in from some other area. I assume the same here is true. How does having a situation where there's a lot of people from out of the area come in help Fortunato get away with this? Why might people from other cities kill Fortunato? Because they don't live there? Why would they target him? Yeah.
He's rich.
Because he's rich. It is a robbery that's gone wrong. Who knows where the party is? There's a lot of people here that we never saw. People in Mardi Gras are in costumes as they are in the story. I can tell you from going to Mardi Gras a number of times that the absolute number one all-time popular Mardi Gras costume is the Naughty Lingerie Cat. But the number two all-time popular Mardi Gras costume is the Jester with the conical hat and the bells, and it's exactly what Fortunato's wearing in the story. How does that help? It helps it easily. It's like, well, when was the last time you saw Fortunato? I think I saw him like around 9 o'clock, but you know, he was in that conical hat with the bells that jingled, and there was a lot of people wearing that type of costume. Maybe I saw him, maybe I didn't. You ask someone else, when was the last time you saw Fortunato? I think it was like 10, but I was drinking a lot, and I wasn't, it could be 11, could be 9, not entirely sure, a little fuzzy about what went down that night. Montresor has waited for this moment so that he can kill Fortunato and also not be punished for it. He's set this up very carefully. He's extremely proud of what he's done. In the story, in terms of how language is presented in the story, he's almost always looking up to Fortunato. That means that Fortunato is a bigger, more powerful person than Montresor is. And so he has to figure out a way to get Fortunato to his house, subdue Fortunato, chain him to the wall, and not be caught by anyone, even though he lives there with, let's say, a dozen servants. Here's how it pans out. It was dusk one evening during the supreme madness of the carnival season that I encountered my friend. He accosted me with excessive warmth, for he had been drinking much. The man wore motley. It's an old-fashioned term for the jester's costume. Man wore motley. He had on a tight-fitting party-striped dress, and his head was surmounted with the conical cap and bells. I was so pleased to see him that I thought I should never have done wringing his hand. I said to him, "My dear Fortunato, you are luckily met. How remarkably well you are looking today. But I have received a pipe of what passes for Amontillado, and I have my doubts." "How?" he said.
Amontillado, a pipe impossible. And in the middle of the carnival, I have my doubts, I replied, and I was silly enough to pay the full Amontillado price without consulting you in the matter. You were not to be found, and I was fearful of losing a bargain. Amontillado? I have my doubts. Amontillado. And I must satisfy them. Amontillado! As you are engaged, I am on my way to Lucchese. If anyone has a critical turn, it is he. He will tell me Lucchese cannot tell Amontillado from sherry. And yet some fools will have it that his taste is a match for your own. Here's this kind of fishy now. It's like, I have some expensive wine, and you, Fortunato, like expensive wine. And you, Fortunato, like to think of yourself as having the most sophisticated palate in town. But if you're busy, I can go to your rival, Lucchese, instead, and ask him to come over and test the Amontillado. And yet some fools will have it that his taste is a match for your own. Come, let us go. Whither? To your vault. My friend, no. I will not impose upon your good nature. I perceive you to have an engagement. Lucchese. I have no engagement. Come. My friend, no, it is not the engagement, but the severe cold with which I perceive you are afflicted. The vaults are insufferably damp. They are encrusted with niter. Let us go, nevertheless. The cold is a mere nothing. Amontillado! You have been imposed upon. And as for Lucchese, he cannot distinguish sherry from Amontillado. Okay. If Fortunato goes over to Montresor's vaults, and Montresor really does have Amontillado, what then does Fortunato get? What does he get? He gets some really great wine when everyone else is drinking $2 Chuck here at the last days of Carnival. If Fortunato goes over to Montresor's house and there is no Amontillado, it's some cheap knockoff, what then does Fortunato get that he likes?
He's still better than Montresor.
Right. He gets a story to tell for the rest of his life. Fortunato probably processes this. If it's there, I get Amontillado. If not, for the rest of my life, I could be like, Montresor, let's go over to your house and have what was that again? Oh, the Amontillado. He's going to lord that over Montresor for years. It'll be a funny story he tells to continually insult Montresor in front of their friends. This is enough to get Fortunato over to Montresor's house. They are starting to go down into the vaults. And Montresor set this up. He's left out bottles of wine. He knows that Fortunato is bigger and more powerful than he is. And so to subdue him, he's going to have to intoxicate him. And so he's left out wine as they go so he can continually open up bottles of wine and then ply Fortunato with more alcohol. He turned toward me and looked into my eyes with two filmy orbs that distilled the rheum of intoxication. Niter, he asked at length. Niter, I replied, how long have you had that cough? My poor friend found it impossible to reply for many minutes. It is nothing, he said at last. Come, I said, with decision. We will go back. Your health is precious. You are rich, respected, admired, beloved. You are happy as once I was. You are a man to be missed. For me, it is no matter. We will go back. You will be ill, and I cannot be responsible. Besides, there's Lucchese. Enough, he said. The cough is a mere nothing. It will not kill me. I shall not die of a cough. True, I replied. You'll not die of a cough. Dehydration would be my guess 3 days from now. They go down into the cellars. There's the jingling of his hat. That will be replaced later by the jingling of the chains. The drinks continue. The insults continue. As Fortunato gets drunk, you can see what's irritated Montresor for years because the insults come one right after another. They're all these little digs that are meant to demean Montresor. Here I knocked off the neck of a bottle which I drew from a long row of its fellows that lay upon the mold. So he set out the bottles. Drink, I said, presenting him with the wine. He raised his lips with a leer. He paused and nodded to me familiarly while his bells jingled. I drink, he said, to the buried that repose around us, and I to your long life. He again took my arm and we proceeded. These vaults, he said, are extensive. The Montressors, I replied, were a great numerous family. Here's the first insult. And they're kind of these minor continuous digs. These vaults, are extensive, right? He's never been over here before. Here's the insult. Montressor, I'd kind of imagined you living in like a lifestyle condo, but really now that I get over here, the house is far bigger than I imagined. The insult is, Montressor, the house here is larger than your image is in town. This is a bigger house than what most people thought you lived in. That insult's done. Next insult. I forget your arms, okay? It's not these things he's talking about. They're right in front of him. He means, I forget your family arms, your coat of arms. What image represents your clan? Who does Fortunato remember their coat of arms? Well, that billionaires club. He remembers all the people in the billionaires club, the people that are at his echelon and above. Fortunato remembers that. But those multimillionaires, he can't be bothered to remember that. So here's the next insult. It's like, I only pay attention to those people that are my equals or above me, whereas, Montressor, you're below me. How can I remember your coat of arms? So it's that type of dig. You are not important to me. I forget your arms. And by this point, I think Montressor is just starting to have fun with it. This clearly isn't his coat of arms. He's just riffing. He's making up stuff here to explain to the drunk Fortunato about who he really is in this moment. I forget your arms. A huge human foot door in an azure field. The foot crushes the serpent rampant whose fangs are embedded in the heel. What's my coat of arms? What's my family all about, Fortunato? It's this. There's this little annoying serpent down there that's bitten me, and I am going to crush that thing till it dies. Fortunato's so drunk he doesn't pick up on it. And the motto? Here's Montressor riffing yet again. He's just making up stuff. Nemo me impune licet. What does that mean? What's my family motto? What's my family all about? It's nemo me impune licet. No one provokes me without impunity. Or to put that in kind of a conventional vernacular, nobody pisses me off and gets away with it. That's what my family's about, Fortunato. But first, another drink of the Medoc. I broke and reached him a flagon of de Grave. He emptied it at a breath. His eyes flashed with a fierce light. He laughed and threw the bottle upwards with a gesticulation I didn't understand. I looked at him in surprise. He repeated the movement, a grotesque one. You do not comprehend? Okay, what's happening here? Fortunato is in a club called the Masons. He's in the Masonic Lodge. They have hand gestures. They're flashing signs back to each other. Fortunato's flashing signs, and there's going to be a response sign that if Montressor was in the Masons, he would know how to flash back. So Fortunato's over there going like, west side, and he's waiting for the response sign to come back from Montressor. It's not coming. Is Fortunato confused whether or not Montressor is really in this elitist club with him? No. So why is he bringing it up? Insult him again, right? It's like, oh, yes, right, you weren't in that club. Sorry, yeah, forget that sign. You never saw it. It's to insult him yet again. You do not comprehend? Not I replied. Then you are not of the Brotherhood? How? You are not of the Masons? Yes, I replied. Yes. You. Impossible. A Mason? A Mason, I replied. A sign. It is this, I answered. And from beneath the fold of his coat, he produces a trowel. It's like, oh, Fortunato, your super rich guy club, the Masons. I'm not a member of that, but I'm a Mason. I'm not the kind of Mason that hangs out down at the bar and talks about how much money we have. I'm the type of Mason that's going to use this tool of masonry to build a wall over there behind it to kill you. That's the type of Mason that I am, Fortunato. Fortunato's drunk. Montressor is able to subdue him. He brings him over to a corner of the crypt. There's dungeon-like S&M chains on the wall already there. He's able to chain him up into the corner, standing up against the wall. He's already put out some type of cement, and he has stones to make a new wall. He also has bones and other materials to prop the wall to make that new wall look as though it has been there forever. So if anyone investigates, they won't think that there's something behind it. He has the wall almost done. It was now midnight, and my task was drawing to a close. I had completed the 8th, 9th, and 10th tier. I had finished a portion of the last and the 11th. There remained but a single stone to be fitted and plastered in. I struggled with its weight. I placed it partially in its destined position. But now there came from out the niche a low laugh that erected the hairs upon my head. It was succeeded by a sad voice, which I had difficulty in recognizing as that of the noble Fortunato. The voice said, "Ha ha, hee hee, a very good joke. Indeed, an excellent jest. We will have many a rich laugh about it at the palazzo. Hee hee, over wine. Hee hee." "The Amontillado," I said. "Hee hee, yes, the Amontillado. But is it not getting late? Will they not be awaiting us at the palazzo? The Lady Fortunato and the rest, i.e. the possible witnesses? Let us be gone." "Yes," I said, "let us be gone." "For the love of God, Montresor." "Yes," I said, "for the love of God." But to these words, I hearkened in vain for a reply. I grew impatient. I called aloud, "Fortunato." No answer. I called again, "Fortunato." No answer still. I thrust a torch through the remaining aperture. He puts in his flame and lets it drop down through the aperture and let it fall within. There came forth in return only a jingling of the bells. My heart grew sick on account of the dampness of the catacombs. I hastened to make an end of my labor. I forced the last stone into its position. The wall's complete now. I plastered it up. Against the new masonry, I erected an old rampart of bones. For the half of a century, no mortal has disturbed them. In pace resquiat. Rest in peace. You stand there. Poe's ideas for how stories should work. They aren't there to deliver intellectual material. They aren't there to engage the audience in political arguments. For Poe, stories are the extension of poetry. They are there to create narrative situations that allow the reader to participate vicariously in extreme emotional circumstances. Poe's aware of who his audience is. He works as an editor of magazines. He works as an essayist. He does his best to figure out how he can make his money through the world of literary production in his life. He knows that the people that are buying his work are largely upper middle class or rich individuals. Almost everyone who's centralized in a Poe story is someone who's wealthy. In Cask of Amontillado, it is a feud between two very rich individuals. In The Fall of the House of Usher, these are people of leisure. Someone from town who clearly doesn't have a job is going out into the forest to visit someone whose family has their own, in essence, castle and island. The only story that we've read that's a departure from that is The Telltale Heart. The main character in that story is a hired live-in aide. It's a young man who's taking care of an elderly person. It's his job to help the old man dress himself, to get him ready for the day, probably to cook for him as well. But even in this story, where we don't have a centralized main character who's wealthy, I think it still plays towards a wealthy audience in that it works on their fears. The idea behind the story seems to be, oh, rich people who can hire servants, be very, very careful who you hire into your house, or this might happen to you. You might be chopped up and left under the floorboards of the place that you presently live.
And that brings us to the end of our discussion of Poe's classic story, The Cask of Amontillado.